Good morning and welcome to the Newport Beach City Council Special Meeting 2017 Planning Session, January 14, 2017. Can we do a roll call, please, Madam Clerk?
The record will reflect that all members of council are present.
And the report. I pledge allegiance to the United States of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This morning we'll do presentations from staff, public works, financing, and community development. So first, let's do, there'll be numerous times to comment on the items, but right now we have public comments on non-agenda items.
Thank you, Mayor Muldoon and members of the council. My name is Jim Mosier. Commenting on non-agenda items at a planning session is difficult because the public doesn't know in advance what specifically may be on the agenda. This is especially true of item 6, your guidance that you're going to be giving to staff. Both Logic and the Brown Act suggest that to influence your thinking, we need to comment before or during your discussions. I'm going to take a stab at this. I could start as I did last year by pointing out the fallacy of setting new goals without formally and collectively reviewing the status of the previously set goals, but I have a more overarching thought that I wanted to try to convey to you this morning. Setting goals for the coming year is admirable. Starting to think about the city's slightly longer-range general plan is also admirable. But all this planning would be much more meaningful if we had confidence it was part of a trajectory toward a mutually agreed-upon, much longer vision of Newport Beach. Newport Beach, as a municipal corporation, is now 110 years old. It has grown from a community of a few hundred people to one of nearly 90,000. That is partly through geographic expansion, and it's also largely through a vast intensification of the population. And it's evolved not just physically, but also in our perception of how government should affect the lives of the individual citizens. Before thinking about the goals for the next year or the next 20 years, I would suggest we think more clearly about our vision for what Newport Beach should be like 110 years from now, and whether the goals we're setting fit on a path towards that objective. For the younger of you, 110 years might seem like an unfathomably long span of time, but to the older of us, it is not, and I would submit that some of the children alive in our city today will be alive 110 years from now. Yet I would guess we have little agreement as to what this city will look like at that time. At the most basic level, are we planning today for a future city of 80,000 people or one of 800,000 people? I would guess our individual visions range from the skyrocket view of progress as some constantly expanding magical improvement, always going on and expanding, to what I might call a more European view of progress in which technology changes, but a town or city retains the same essential size, character, and appearance that it had 100 years before. Or other extreme, the sort of colonial Williamsburg view in which some might think that everything, including culture and technology, should be frozen forever exactly as it was today. I think an attempt at achieving some kind of consensus of that very long-range vision would help us better weigh the merit of your short-term goals. And since California is a very young and not yet stable place, I think it would be wise to study what has worked and not worked in older parts of this country as well as older parts of the world. Thank you.
Any other public comments on non-agenda items? Seeing none, let's go back to staff for the fiscal picture update.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we will start with just really a brief. Dave just passed me an update. So any of you that would like to connect to the Wi-Fi, the city network,
is the CNB-hub, and the password is public at CCESS1. Does anybody need me to repeat that? And there are cards all around. Okay, so I'll start out with a brief summary of our financial picture. We're not going to get into too many details. We ended the year on a good note. Property taxes increased roughly $7 million over the prior year. $5 million of that $7 million growth was 90% driven by the residential real estate market, as always. That is a typical scenario in our city. $1 million of that increase was driven by residual distributions of the redevelopment agencies dismantling. Now, that revenue stream is always a bit difficult to predict from year to year, but we did achieve a $1 million unexpected payment there. Now, sales tax, while it shows a 12% year-over-year increase, approximately 2.7 million of that increase had to do with a one-time true-up from the state, something that was called the triple flip. This is a complex, old funding mechanism that shifted a portion of the sales tax from cities to the state. And the important thing to note, it's a one-time payment, and otherwise our sales tax growth was only 3.8%. We are seeing this trend slow a bit. We won't, the information that we receive from the state does lag. We won't receive information on the Christmas quarter really until April. But we are seeing a bit of a slowdown, and we're seeing a similar slowdown in hotel taxes. Now, by no means am I suggesting that we're in contraction mode. It's just that we're no longer seeing those very steep increases when we were coming out of the recession. So we're probably more in a normal growth scenario. Before I leave this, does anybody have questions on revenues?
Did not use actual numbers, but just to remind everyone, so to refresh my memory, so on property tax, the city gets back about 16%, is that correct, from the state in terms of our portion of the property taxes that come back?
So so of the 1% that folks pay on their property tax bill, we receive about 16 cents on the dollar back. And in total, for secured property taxes, that equates to about $68 million. 80% of that is residential. This year we saw some extraordinary movement in the residential market, and that drove about 90% of our increase.
Okay, one other question on the sales tax. Are you going to be talking about the impact, maybe slide, of the reduction in the sales tax? Is it to 7.5? And how that impacts us? The city gets 1% back on that sales tax, if I'm correct. And so what is the impact of the reduction in the sales tax?
We won't see really much of an impact of that. We didn't adopt a reduction here locally or an increase locally. So to the extent that we see a reduction, it would be from the county pool sales. So those would be transactions that were either over the internet or outside of the county. We may see a slightly smaller share, but not directly.
Not significant. Yeah, okay, okay, very good, thank you.
So the net result of the good, strong revenue situation resulted, again, in strong reserves. Cutting right to the chase, we ended the year with a $10 million surplus. Roughly 40% of that was driven by revenues that exceeded expectations, so around $4 million, and the rest essentially was derived from reduced expenditures. We had some vacancies in some of the safety departments that drove some of that savings, but $10 million in total. And the way this table is laid out in a comparative manner between 15 and 16 is that the top categories are the most restrictive, going down to the least restrictive when you get to the contingency and our surplus. Now, you might notice in total that the total fund balance decreased $90 million to $81 million, or $8.1 million decrease. But this was a result of mostly transferring some of the restricted, committed, and assigned categories outside the general fund. And for example, in the restricted category, that would be, say, our affordable housing in lieu money. We moved outside of the general fund to better reflect its restricted nature. We also transferred all of the CIP, the capital improvement activity and reserves outside of the general fund as well. I used to have a difficult time, as you know, those cash flows ebb and flow each year, and always had a difficult time explaining that, we'd have revenues of $200 million, yet expenditures with those residual capital improvements made it look like we had $220 million worth of expenditures. So essentially I moved those out, so we'll have a little cleaner picture of the general fund reserves and expenditures moving forward. But before I leave the slide, does anyone have questions? Okay, moving on. So looking forward, this is where, I just said to a gentleman, we're very fortunate here in Newport Beach. Our revenues and our reserves are not the problem. We do have our budget challenges, but they are first world challenges. So looking at the budget cycle, this is our typical cycle. We start working on our revenue estimates in December. Departments have already turned in their department-specific estimates, and we're in the process of actually meeting with departments right now to go over them. We'll ask them to submit their department their budgets in January. We'll meet with them in February. We'll have city, then the city manager, it's the city manager's job to actually, based on what he's heard from the departments and what our updated fiscal picture is, to make a recommendation to council. So to be very clear, the budget is his recommendation. So then it would proceed for an in-depth finance committee review, city council review in April and May, and hopefully budget adoption in June. So our challenges, again, we have sufficient revenue to cover our base operations, to cover our nuts and bolts CIPs, to continue with our facilities financial plans, although we are taking a harder look at the previous projects on that list. Our tough challenges, number one is really getting on sound footing with our pensions. The 2008 crisis in the equities market has really illuminated how serious the pension situation really is today. So not that it wasn't there prior to 2007, it just was masked by well-performing markets. Now that markets are not well-performing, we see that we're highly leveraged against our pension plan. And if I were to name one Achilles heel that the city of Newport Beach has, it is the pension system potential impact on the city. The other, our other goal this year is to start banking enough money for seawalls and the harbor master plan. And as a longtime employee, I'm really embarrassed it's taken us this long to get there. I take responsibility for that as well. But we should have always had a long-term view of what it takes to preserve our harbor and seawalls. But that is underway. Most of the master plans that exist now for facilities replacement, setting money aside for risk management, for facilities maintenance didn't exist before. It took some initiative on folks to get them going, and that's where we are today. And looking forward, I think we're going to have a plan for perpetual replacement to preserve the harbor, to maintain it, and to protect our residents and their property with seawalls, et cetera. So those two by themselves are to me, I think the big goals. I'll let either the mayor or Kim Brandt from the CDD speak to the need to update the general plan. That's just a little bit out of my knowledge base. Labor negotiations are on our radar as well. The safety plans are up for negotiation. We still need to deal with setting aside an appropriate amount for our wastewater master plan as well. And as I said, we have a number of other strategic savings plans to make sure we have sufficient money to cover our vehicles, et cetera. Yes, sir.
Are we concerned about the funding status of our internal services funds?
The only one that really caught my eye is general liability. We have some contingent liabilities, as we do every year. Whether they'll pan out is a question, but so we have actuaries that mark an expected target, and we try to target a level of reserves for say it's a margin for adverse deviation, so an amount above what we expect our liability to be. And so that's really our target. And we're about $1.5 million shy of where I'd like to be in that regard. Our policy guides us that we would make that up, any of those shortfalls over 3 years.
Well, so last year when we took the budget surplus, one of the reasons we didn't do additional discretionary pension pay down was because we were shoring up that general liability fund. So are we still short?
We are. There were some recent events during this last fiscal year that had us increase, to be conservative, to say that these are potential outcomes. That where I did make a management decision to up some of those liabilities in the event that they occur, and that resulted in us falling a bit short.
Okay.
And we'll go over that in finance. Sure.
Dan, can I just make a comment, not so much a question, just for everyone's understanding of our financial process. Up there at the top where we say the $5 million general fund capital improvement program. So just so residents know, in a city our size, Mr. Mosier was talking about our goals in the city of our size of 87,000 people. We spend, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, typically every year our capital improvement program is about 60 to 70 million dollars. Is that correct? All in?
That's right.
Okay. So I just want people here today and whoever is listening to understand that for the city's general fund to provide $5 million a year for capital programs is an anomaly in municipal finance. Typically, a city our size would be spending out of the general fund about $60 million a year to improve the roadways, to keep our city functioning, all the programs that we're going to be hearing about later from Dave Webb. So I just want people to understand that because of external funding sources over the years that have been very important to the city, that drive the funding sources for our facilities financial plan. So because of actually good planning for prior years, we have reserved funds, that's development and external funds, Measure M, related to transportation and roadways, county, state, federal funds. The Park Avenue Bridge is paid exclusively with federal funds. So we have, the city staff and prior councils have done a very fine job of identifying external sources. Otherwise, our general fund would be burdened with finding $60 million a year to sustain and maintain our infrastructure and the programs that and the projects that improve our quality of life and drive our property values as we see those property values increase. So I just want people to know that $5 million out of our general fund is a very small amount that residents the city residents are all taxpayers through their property tax, sales tax, and visitors to our city contribute to our general fund, but only $5 million comes out of that general fund to keep our city looking the way it does. So it's a couple points in me saying this. I want to compliment the staff and prior councils that we have kept this revenue flow coming in. Our planning going forward is to find ways to ensure that those revenue sources continue one way or the other. But only $5 million is not very much for a city our size. So I just wanted to make that point. Thank you. Thank you, Dan.
I'm going to take the next section, and this is about the CalPERS discount rate changes. And I do this because Dan knows it so well that we dive really deep, and it's kind of a scary thing to dive that deeply into CalPERS arcaneness. So the CalPERS board, just at the end of December there, lowered its discount rate. So what does that mean? And that was a good thing that it lowered its discount rate. It said that we CalPERS do not expect to earn the same amount of revenue per year that we thought we would. And I think everyone in this room is seeing that with their own investments, that 7.5%, 7.75% was an unreasonable projection in the long term. In fact, CalPERS' own investment advisors say going forward they expect to earn about 6.2 or 6.25%. So if the investment is lower like that, it balloons our unfunded liability. So this is a look at a little bit of that ballooning. You see what the discount rate is. If you move over to the right side of the chart at 7.0, you see that our regular unfunded liability in 2015 was about 270, 275. There's an investment loss that's included in that, and that's the little red bar. And then the change in the discount rate that they'll step down over 3 steps adds another $51 million to that unfunded liability. So this is obviously a big concern. These are promises made, arguably contracts that can't be undone with employees, many of whom are long retired. Let's move to the next slide, Dan. So Dan and I have been working on something that, what if the discount rate was actually 6.5? What if it wasn't 7? What if it was 6.5? We've also looked at 6.2, but the 6.5 going forward, that balloons the unfunded liability by about another $61 million. That's obviously quite consequential. Let's go to the next slide. So just so folks in the room know, Of our pension costs, there are two elements. There is what's called the normal cost of an employee's pension, and that is assuming the employee and the employer were setting aside the right amount of money every year, and that nothing odd happened, and there was a certain investment return. So when something odd happens, that becomes your unfunded liability. That was the market crash of 2008 and 2009. That is something like another thing that can affect unfunded liability, again, outside of the normal cost, is what if your projections about employee lifespans were wrong? And I've made this point before. It is wonderful that our retirees are living a long time, but it really impacted our projections. So I say we're going to implement an illness program instead of a wellness program. But anyway, so our payment per year is now in the range of $28 to $29 million, $24 million. It's the default minimum. That's the payment we're obligated to make to cover that unfunded liability on an annual basis. It doesn't address it. It addresses it over a long period of time. It's like a home mortgage, but your home mortgage moves every year. So these are the range of alternatives. Alternative 3 there on the right side would be if we were trying to catch up over 15 to 17 to 18 years at a 6.5% discount rate. So you can see the difference there. It's about $41 million to $24 million, or about $16 or $17 million per year that arguably should be paid or could be paid to accomplish our unfunded liability concerns. That doesn't mean we have to do this. PERS is telling us we have to do the default minimum. And we're going to talk about that just in a moment when we talk about some of the budget challenges. But I just want you to hold on to this thought. It's not a panic slide. It's a thoughtful slide that helps drive some of our other conversations in a few moments. Will has a question.
I can't help it. I'm always going to talk about this. So, Dan, could you direct folks to where they can see the slide, the presentations that we received at the Finance Committee, both from your staff and then from an outside actuary that we had brought in, because that is the deeper dive that if folks are looking at these numbers and wondering what that means for us on a going forward basis, I believe that would be remarkably helpful, and we do have them up on the website. So could you direct folks where that is?
Sure. So if you were to just go to our URL, and in this case, if you did a /budget, that would take you to the budget sections. If you replace that with use our URL /pensions, that will bring you to the pension presentations and various actions we've taken.
Okay. And one thing, Dave, that I didn't hear you mention when we were talking about the cost of pensions, would you mind briefly discussing employee contributions as well?
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up, Will. The employees pay $9 million in a growing amount too, that covers a portion of that normal cost and a portion of the unfunded liability cost. So our overall pension cost of about $40 million a year, the employees are paying 9 of it, and that's up from 0, say, just about 8 or 9 years ago.
Okay, so last year when we were at this. I was admittedly in the audience a year ago, but I was watching this, and I remember a slide showing exactly how it broke down, and I'm looking at it right now actually. The estimated cost for normal cost last year was $15.5 million. The amortized cost of unfunded pension liability was estimated at about $21.8 million, which brought us to a little over $37 million, and then the employee contributions was 8.6. So of the normal cost, the ones that basically the default minimum that we owe, not counting the unfunded, we're talking over half of that amount is being paid by our employees. So a little over $8 million of the 15.5 that we owe as a normal cost is being paid by employees. Is that how you understood it?
In a pooled sense, yes. One of the challenges with our labor negotiations, and I say this with great respect to our safety employees. Our safety employees pay less than half the normal cost. Our non-safety employees pay more, but that's because the pension program is so much more expensive for the safety employees. And I've also said that if if we were to catch the safety employees up, we're talking about a 25% pay cut, which is ridiculous and unfair. So, but, sorry, point's well taken there.
Just to piggyback, just to frame the understanding of our financial obligation, which I'm not, again, we're not on a cliff, or we're not yelling fire in a crowded building, but we just want everyone to understand in the community what our costs are. But just to, in your mind's eye, just understand percentages. So our total PERS cost is 16.34% of our total general fund operating expenses. Is that correct? And what was it 5 years ago?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
Yeah.
My guess would be down in the 12s or 11s.
So, and this number, the trend number is increasing? The percent number is increasing?
It is increasing. Remember, too, that we did a fresh start, so we voluntarily increased that percentage.
That's correct, but it still is money.
Yeah,
And
in any city, it's increasing.
And the term that's being used that you hear about, money that's being allocated to pay the pension obligation, is that's crowding out spending on other programs normally funded through a general fund. So just keep that in your mind. 16% is a big number for a study our size with a $200 million general fund budget. Okay, thank you.
So next slide. I'm going to move to a happier subject. One of the things that, as Dan mentioned, and I know Mr. Duffield, Mr. Avery, and others have mentioned, is kind of really getting the harbor where it needs to be. So the concept of an expense we need to anticipate is, what does this mean? How can it be funded? I won't spend a lot of time with it because actually Dave will spend a little bit more time with it, but the key needs are setting aside enough money for seawalls, and then enough money for regular routine dredging, and then maybe, as Dave Webb will talk about, dredging in a whole new way. So just making sure that we are not neglecting the harbor as arguably we have done in years past. Next slide, please. So this slide is I hate to throw spreadsheets at you, but this is more about how we could possibly allocate some funds to accomplish these goals. And I did talk with the mayor a little bit about this, so this includes some of his recommendations. In the surplus column, that first one, you see this concept of maybe allocating half of that towards pensions and half of that towards the harbor capital plan, and put in parentheses there seawalls. And then looking forward, Dan and I have worked on this next column to say that if revenue growth continues, you could set aside allocations like this, including supporting the general liability account, a little bit even more towards the harbor capital plan, more towards pensions as things move forward. And you start to get closer, you see with that 12.5 number, to meeting some of those pension obligations. And I'm not saying today that is an amount that should go to PERS. Your council and your finance committee has talked about a different way of doing that, like a Section 115 trust that might set that aside in a city-controlled entity that was reserved for a future payment or a future strategy. And I think that's probably a sensible path. I know your finance committee is looking at that. Any questions about this slide? This is just, as we're noting, it's a possible allocation. It's not something, it's something we want you to look at versus land on today. So let's go to the next slide. So some takeaways. I think today, January 2017, shows the city in good shape. Strong revenue. We've made good progress in the past. The facilities are in good shape. Our nuts and bolts are funded. Base operations are funded, but there are challenges ahead. And I'm going to make some recommendations here. These are discussion recommendations. I do think it's important for us to think outside of the box, and let's call that the CalPERS box on pensions, that the rate of return may be lower than 7%, and that what are the consequences of that. I do think there is a potential for significant state changes over the next 3 to 5 years. And as Dan would point out, that doesn't change our unfunded liability because that is cooked. That is banked, a banked liability. But it would help our normal cost. And what some of those changes might be if employees today, who are working today, I'll call them current employees, for the years not yet worked, that the benefit formula could be changed. This is very controversial with labor groups up and down the state. But this thought that my last 5 years or my last 10 years would be a lower benefit formula is one that I think the state needs to look at, because a lot of cities are in a lot more concerning financial situation than us. And I think over the next 3 to 5 years, they're going to start to cry uncle. And that is code for maybe not meeting their obligations. Certainly crowding out infrastructure and important things like that. So there is some reason to sit back and wait and see what the state does and pool some of our money and save it for a future strategy. That's right. As Ms. Dixon's pointing out, there is a case coming out of Marin County that says that employees are entitled to a reasonable pension, and there are unreasonable pensions, and that's the point that Marin County was making. So the next one I really think you should look at, and actually Mr. Muldoon brought this up his first day, review planned capital project for essential versus non-essential. That means taking a hard look at the projects in the FFP. Keep investing in the nuts and bolts, though. We can do that. We should do that. But there's some things that I think arguably are non-essential, and we're going to talk about those in a little bit, that should be looked at. I just mentioned the allocation of the 15-16 surplus, 50% towards pension obligations, 50% towards a seawall down payment. Again, I did talk with the mayor about that. The theme of this overall approach to me is protect our quality of life and our programs and our facilities, make strong progress on our obligations, but preserve as much local budget flexibility as possible. So with that, I know Dan and I would welcome any more of your questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Kiff. Just to go back to the seawall down payment, we'll call it. What is the I know the community's been involved and back and forth with the council as well as projected numbers and what kind of wall we would like to see. Can you please share your thoughts on that, what you think the end price is going to be, and when we would need to have that by?
So when the council has fairly recently looked at this in the past, it said, let's tackle our immediate problem, which is a small cap, a low cap around especially the north side of Balboa Island. Repair of the it would be a repair and or replacement of the seawalls around, it would be where Collins Island is, kind of the west side of Balboa. And it's just a stretch of it. It's not all of it that is having that problem. Also, we need about a 6-inch cap on the south side of Bayfront. So all of that is actually in your budget. We're making progress on that this year, and we're going through permitting and design. So the best question then is what you're asking, Mr. Muldoon, is what's next, and when would next occur? So what's next could be a more substantial replacement of the seawalls in Grand Canal, although those are going to hold up for a while, we think, with the sands, when we keep piling up the sand. But we should plan for maybe in the next 15 to 20 years, probably a $20 to $30 million allocation of a future more significant seawall project. I've seen numbers that are much higher than that, but I think we need to study that further, but I think a reasonable goal would be 20 to 30 million saved up over the next 15 to 20 years.
So if we were to target, we're trying to look ahead, obviously, on this, and that's why we're being more aggressive. My thought, at least, my colleagues will, of course, have a say in this if they agree, to put part of the surplus aside almost immediately for the sake of the seawall down the road. But if we were to essentially, let's say hypothetically shift $5 million to that, and then we have roughly 10 years to come up with 20 to 15 million, how would we budget for that going forward? Do you think it's wise to continue to aggressively do that, or is now not the time, and instead we should build in small amounts dedicated going forward until it's time to actually construct?
I think your idea about $5 million now gives us a good starting bank, and then if you took 15 years to allocate another $1 million a year, although costs will go up too, but arguably that's quite a good way to do it. I think squeezing out $1 million a year isn't that dramatic to our budget and would still allow us to accomplish other capital needs, other capital nuts and bolts needs. I do think it does squeeze out, when you layer pensions on that, the more non-essential things, as we call them.
Just for clarification, the $20 to $30 million one you're discussing, is that at the controversial height, or is that essentially just keeping, and Mr. Herdman's going to have a big say in this as well, is that essentially keeping the consistent or slightly higher version of what we have right now?
That would, I think the approach is incremental changes in height, small, almost like, I'm minimizing it here, but like if you had Legos, every 10 years you could put on another Lego if you needed it. And that allows us to really take a hard look at, or take just an observational look at what's going on with sea level rise, what's going on with our storms, and is the wall high enough? So that 20 to 30 looks at both the fundamental infrastructure of the base wall and small opportunities to cap over time. It's not a jump from where we are now to 9 feet or 12 feet all at once.
Seeing no questions from my colleagues, public comments.
Really just have a question. Does the surplus, is it different from reserves? I mean, we have a reserve in the budget too, don't we? Or is that the same? Yes means yes.
Well, I'll answer your question when you're done. So.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. So reserves and surplus are two different things. Reserves is how much you've set aside in the bank over time. And our policy directs us to set aside about $45 million just in, we have no idea what could happen to us. If we need money in emergency, we have $45 million in the bank, which is really nice, good amount. The surplus is an annual thing that comes in that, as Dan's pointing out, whether revenues were a little higher than expected, or we have to kind of pat ourselves a little tiny bit on the back, whether we were able to hold down expenditures more than we projected. So what we do is you can take that surplus without affecting the reserves, so that makes sense.
Dennis Baker, and just a quick question, is there any federal money available, since it's a federal waterway, for the seawalls?
We continue to look for any other sources of funds for seawall repair. We haven't seen anything really jump out at us right now, but if something does, we'll take a look. Maybe if there is a big infrastructure bill, we would be right on that. So, I mean, infrastructure legislation at the federal level.
Yes, on the CalPERS funds, their huge pool, when it was 7.5% or 7%, as I understand it, that's the return that they set, that they say they project that they expect to get in this given year. And then the actual return they get is something different than that. Okay, and based upon that set rate, that's how they project how much the different agencies have to pay into the general fund for the CalPERS. So I always was under the impression that when they lowered the rate, it was good for the residents because it set a more realistic rate. Because you know, if they're saying, well, we're going to say, you know, if they raised it to 10%, then it would show, you know, there's just so much money out there that we don't have a financial problem here. When in reality, we do, because not enough money is going in. Okay, so all it's doing is just extending the limit on the credit card, running it up. But then each year, if I'm not mistaken, they say, we did not hit our target, so they send us a bill. Okay, and they say, now you have to send this in. Okay, so, so anyways, I was kind of surprised. I paid a little bit more attention this year. I've been coming to these things for probably 28 years now, and I remember when our budget used to be, I think around 2000, it was around 135 or 140,000 and million, excuse me. Now it's up to like 280 million, okay? And I really appreciate this council and previous councils and this city manager putting a huge magnifying glass on the unfunded pensions, because it is a huge thing that's coming at us. It does keep many of us awake at night. But I'm also believe of all the cities in the area, and probably even in the state, we're probably more ahead of that than almost anybody else. Okay, and we're doing a very good job. But I also believe 5, 10 years down the road, there are going to be municipalities all over hitting the block wall, and something's going to be done. Okay, so my little concern here, and we haven't gotten there yet, but my little concern, because we have such responsible council members that really want to put a laser on this, that we're going to lose necessary public infrastructure projects like, you know, the concern, do we not want to improve Irvine Boulevard, perhaps just throw some bark down and save $3 or $4 million here? Okay, well, the residents in Newport Beach, we pay a premium to live here. We pay a premium in our property taxes and our home prices and everything. We have certain standards here, okay? And I realize we can't do extravagant projects, but there are certain minimum projects, and you haven't gotten there yet, okay? But what I just want to say is that in focusing on this so much, I'm hoping that we don't lose, like improving Coast Highway that looks terrible on the west side of town. Okay, and again, I just wonder what good we do at 15, 20 years from now. We're 35% ahead of everybody in the state in paying down the budget, and then some relief comes that we don't need to participate in because we all sacrificed so much.
Nancy Gardner. I'm pleased that you're looking at the harbor in terms of sea level rise, but the harbor's the easy one. It's expensive, but it's easy. We know what to do. We have a whole lot of real estate that faces the ocean, and it's not critical right now. But if we wait to think about plans, then we are going to be very limited in our options if sea level meets certain projections. So what I'm hoping the city will start to do is put together a long-term plan for sea level rise for our ocean-facing properties so that we can be flexible, we can take advantage and be nimble. If there's a dredging project, maybe we can be very strategic in our use of sand. Maybe we will talk about certain natural processes like dunes that we can restore. We'll have time to work with the community to get all the best input. So I'm hoping we won't put off just the thought about it until it's too late. Thank you.
Morning, Mayor, City Council. My name is Lee Pearl with Balboa Island, past president of the Balboa Island Improvement Association. I just wanted to make a really brief comment on the seawall and funding opportunities for the seawall. I believe that the project really has justification for outside funding, both either state or federal, because it's one of the areas that people from all over the world come to visit. It's a public sidewalk and area, and I think if we worked really closely with our congressmen and other legislatures, we could find funding to help offset the city having to pick up the full brunt of the funding on the seawall. And I would be happy to work with the city and city staff in meetings, but I think we could effectively raise some money, much needed money, for that seawall project from outside city resources. Thank you.
Hello, Brian Ozonian. I didn't know Lee was going to talk about that, but that's what I came up to talk about. I think I've talked to Councilmember Dixon about this before. Consider hiring a consultant to do fundraising, because Balboa Island is a jewel for the county as well as the city. And start looking at it like it's precious to so many people. We have a lot of visitors that specifically come here, even on shoulder months, to visit just for Balboa Island. We have day-to-day interaction all the time. It's highly impacted, and it's got a passion to it that I think has to be tapped into, that is for everyone to share. And I think sometimes a consultant does this best because they have a different view than city staff working on it. So I'm looking for a non-governmental approach to funding this with a passion so that we can do it. And I've told you before, I do not like the Ed Seelig plan, which is the current plan. I think it ought to be done like Bay Isle, and I've testified to that before. And there's a lot of engineering reasons why, but if you looked at your own city's extrapolation of costs over 20 years, you'll see the wisdom in doing it right versus putting good money after bad. So, you know, it's an old adage in construction. If you keep putting money into something, you know, it just keeps going in a big sinking hole. Well, we have something that we know is going to deteriorate, and we need to put our best engineering for it, and I think it'll pay back, and we can walk away from it. And there's even a thing of non-ferrous metal piles that we can use that will outlast everybody. So anyways, I want to encourage that point today. Thanks.
Mayor Muldoon and members of the council, my name again is Jim Mosier, and I have a totally different comment about the city's financial picture. I certainly agree that decisions about pensions and infrastructure are very important, but my more immediate concern is the extent to which the public understands and can track the current ongoing financial activities of the city. I have long wondered why this city does not have an open checkbook in which every check that is written is listed on the consent calendar for public and council review, as is the case in Costa Mesa and in most other governmental agencies that I know. And somewhat less critically, I'm wondering why the claims against the city and the settlements that are made in response to those are not more visible to the public as they used to be. Instead, we heard today, and I'm sure the rest of the audience was as baffled as I was, a whole bunch of government doublespeak about recent events, adverse deviations, liabilities that may occur, without any mention of what those liabilities or deviations might be. I'm sure they're attached to some kind of claim or settlement that is going on. So in that regard, I know that the city has invested over the last couple of years a considerable amount of time and money in deploying a new integrated computer software management system called an Enterprise Resource Program that I thought was supposed to put exactly that information at the fingertips of the public and the city council so that we could see such things as the mysterious details of the budget that indicate what those line items were intended to be spent on and eventually what they were spent on. And with regard to city programs, exactly what each of the status of each of the financial components of those are. So I would like to ask today for our illumination what the status of that Enterprise Resource Program is and what new transparency and visibility we're expecting to see in the next year. Thank you.
Any other public comments? Ms. Kiff, could you briefly answer that question? I'm curious as well.
We're working on, as Jim mentioned, a new ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning program that incorporates all of our what were fairly ancient computerized financial systems. It's close to being done. It rolls out in phases. There's just a final couple of phases left, but it's been successful. We're also working on another software that takes that material that other cities are using, and I was skeptical of it first, but I do think it has some merits. That allows you to draw a lot of conclusions from the data, and it's fairly user-driven. You should see it on our website. Anyone want to yell out when? February. There we go. Real good. That would help you draw out reports and analysis, and us too. What Jim is talking about, though, something that we don't do, we don't publish all of our warrants and our checks in a big log in the back. We, of course, know what they are. We have our auditor reviews them. I always worry that just a handful of people would look at that for all of the work that goes into it, but hopefully I addressed that question.
And now it's time for the pending capital and other projects from staff.
Thank you, Mayor, and good morning, everybody. My name is Dave Webb, Director of Public Works for the city, and we want to talk a little bit about construction projects today, kind of what's going on and what we're heading towards in the future. So I always like to start with what's underway because, and I'll speak in general, forgive me if it's a lot of detail, there's always folks in the audience that want to know specifics, so I'll try to pick up on some things that might be of interest of you. But we have a lot of things going in the city, as you know. A Our current construction projects, I put the major ones on this slide here. We have over 100 and something projects, but I just want to pick out some that you'll be seeing. The Balboa Village entry arch is about to come in. That's just down on the peninsula here. And I think it's actually going to be installed Wednesday. It's a really good-looking arch. I saw the pictures of it. It's taken some time, unfortunately, because it's very detailed in the art area. But look for that. We'll hopefully have a ribbon cutting in the next few weeks to celebrate that. We also have a project you may or may not have noticed, the citywide streetlight LED replacement program. We're going through the city. The city is unusual that we own all our streetlights. A lot of cities, the utility, Southern California Edison owns its streetlights. So we've been retrofitting our lights, and this would be particularly what we call the Cobra lights, which you'll see right out here on Balboa Boulevard. It's the big flat ones that hang over the arterials. And we're changing those out to an LED, which gives us much more energy efficient lights, better light. It's kind of a white versus a yellow, and it lasts a lot longer from a maintenance standpoint. Our next project there, I'm sorry, the blue kind of fades it out. Grand Canal dredging, and if you've been on Balboa Island or that portion of the harbor recently, you saw not only our Park Avenue project, but we had a dredge up in the Grand Canal, and we've done the first phase. There's probably 3 phases here, and they just completed this. We removed a lot of unsuitable material from the bottom of the canal, and we had to haul that off, and we've been doing other work on the beaches in that area. We're planning to do the second phase, which would be north of the Park Avenue Bridge, once the bridge is complete and the temporary bridge at Balboa is taken out. And I would say we're a little delayed on this. This was a priority with prior council and the residents. However, a higher priority is allowing the private residents to dredge in the harbor. And as you may have found, last year we got our eelgrass plan finally approved by the California Coastal Commission, which has allowed people to dredge their private areas, but it also has limits on how much eelgrass we can take out. The good news is we've had so many people step up and get applications for dredging. They're using that whole allotment of eelgrass that we can take out. The bad news is that the Grand Canal has a lot of eelgrass, and that's our allotment too. So we're going to push our project off a little bit so that the private folks can get their dredging done, and then we'll come up behind them and hopefully take that out. The dirt, when we take a dredging project out of the harbor, there's 2 areas. If it's a sandy material, we're required to put it back in the near shore or on a sandy beach, and we have locations for some of that. We're actually going to see some of that around the harbor. We'll relocate it. A lot of the material in the bottom of the Grand Canal is what we call silts and fines or unsuitable for beach placement. And in one case, when we dug through the Grand Canal, they hit one spot of really decomposed organics, which is the stuff that people complain about, that hydrogen sulfur smell. All that material is taken off the coast. It has to be barged out about 4 miles and dumped in a disposal zone that the federal government has allocated for us. So it's very costly to barge your way out there, but that's the only thing we can do with it. That next project there, Newport Heights Alley Sewer Rehabilitation, if you've been following that, we've been trying to do some work in the old areas of Santa Ana Heights up there in Newport Heights. We're rehabilitating the sewer lines, city-owned lines in the alleys to get ready for a new concrete pavement project falling right behind that, which I'll talk about later. Park Avenue Bridge is almost done. We're about 3 months away, we think. Probably, I'm going to say February, March is our target on that. The old bridge is gone if you've been down, then the new bridge is now being constructed. The pile caps are being placed in. To speed the project up, we're actually using prefabricated beams. So they'll be coming in soon if you like that kind of stuff. We'll have big, long trucks coming in, craning it in. Us construction gigs love that, but we can give you the time. Mark Vukovic is here, and we have a newsletter. Look on our website. They'll tell you when that's coming in if you want to see the placement of the beams. I know Don Webb, he's a big facet of that, and he's down there taking pictures. So the Park Avenue Bridge is coming along. We're also doing an environmental project up in Big Canyon. This is just along Jamboree west of Jamboree towards the harbor. We're doing a water quality and a habitat restoration project in there. And if you can see past, if you look as you're going by there, look towards the west, there's a lot of vegetation there, but you'll see some work down below. We've removed a lot of invasive species, peppercorn trees, and we're putting in a structure to treat selenium and other water quality components that are coming down the creek. That's then released into the creek again, and then there's a lot of habitat vegetation being rehabilitated down below.
What happened to the lawsuit on the cover on the reservoir?
The question the gentleman asked was, what happened to the lawsuit involving the cover on the reservoir? This is the Big Canyon Reservoir. We had a cover problem on that, and we had a lawsuit, and we had a claim, and the city was able to get that money back on that lawsuit. So our next project there is Irvine Avenue pavement rehabilitation and the median rehabilitation, and that's going on if you look up that they've got all the old turf out of the medians. We are looking at putting all the landscaping back into it, and then we'll be repaving the street between basically, I want to say Santiago and University's the big limits, arterials. That'll be happening soon. However, the good news is that we've gotten a lot of rain and we really need it. The bad news for our projects is it makes it tough to pave. So we're a little behind on that. Actually, we want to do a good job, so we purposely will hold off till we get warmer weather and dry streets to do a good job on that. But that's what's going on up there. And then the police station and fire station roof replacement, I got a little note in there. One of your things in here, it says interior improvements. We're actually doing the roof replacements on the police station and this fire station, and that'll be done in spring. Seminole Slough is over by Cappy's off Coast Highway. If you're over that way, we're actually doing a dredging project there. A lot of material has built up over the years in there, and we're going to actually drain the slough, and then we'll be taking that material out and then refilling the slough. So that's going on right now if you are in that area. And then if you live over towards MacArthur, we've talked about a pavement project that's starting there. You've seen some work on the sides of the roads prior to Christmas. We've been doing concrete work. We're about to start the overlay portion of this. Again, it's weather driven. We're a little behind on that because we've had a lot of rain this year, which is good news. So what's about to start? This is what you'll probably see coming up here soon. We do an annual program. We kind of rotate throughout the city every 7 years, and we have a concrete and sidewalk replacement program. That's about to start up in the Mariners, Dover Shores area. So you'll see some work up there. We take out all the root, broken up concrete and things like that and replace it, put in our handicap ramps at the corner. So you'll be seeing a lot of work up there. Every 2 years, we kind of do an ocean pier rehabilitation project, and this is our year. And this is where we look for replacement of hardware, stringers, piles, things that are broken, just to keep the piers in good shape. They're a really good jewel and asset of the city. We actually had 6 piles that we'll have to replace this year, unusual, but we had a lot of breaks this year for some reason. So they're going to be doing that work soon. You'll see that actually out in the piers. And then if you've been following the council items, Ocean Boulevard, Poppy Avenue pavement, if you recall, about a year and a half ago, we did all the new pavement on Marguerite and part of Ocean Boulevard. We will now be doing the next phase of that, which is Poppy Avenue and the remainder of Ocean Boulevard from Marguerite over to Poppy. Completely taking out the old concrete pavement put in the early 20s and putting in new pavement, taking care of a lot of the uprooted concrete sidewalks and things and replacing that. A lot of extensive work with the community on this and council, and we will be revegetating. I know some of the people are concerned about the trees. We are taking out a lot of the diseased eucalyptus area and we're putting in new trees on that project. Lido Village area, we have some more water main work, and I promise not to be out in Newport Boulevard. That's where we've been in the last couple of years. But this is water lines back on the side streets, the Finley track, back behind the old City Hall site. They're old cast iron mains that need to be replaced. We did have a couple breaks in these. Are getting to that age, so we want to get in there and replace those mains. This project will be starting up soon, about March. And then we've had, through the drought, you know that we've had some turf medians that we've turned off, particularly the ones on Jamboree and San Miguel and San Joaquin Hills, and then there's one right out here at the Mixmaster Newport Pier area that we're working on. We're now required to not have turf on our medians, so this is a replacement project. We're going to be doing San Joaquin Hills and San Miguel soon, and we'll be taking out and redoing the old irrigation system and then putting in a drought-tolerant, water-friendly planting in there. So you'll see that soon. San Joaquin Hills has kind of already got an example of it right by Jamboree. If you want to see what that's going to look like, it's a new plant type. We're going to keep that palette and go all the way up. And then on our traffic signal side, Pacific Coast Highway, we have a project we're working in cooperation with the Orange County Transportation Authority and Caltrans to redo the traffic signals from basically Santa Ana River all the way over to Jamboree. We're going to be putting in new controllers, putting in fiber optic backbone cable. And I understand this is a state highway. We had this discussion. It really is a benefit. We're getting grant money from OCTA and some city money to improve the flow and reliability, particularly of these signals in there. The side benefit of this, as we've been building our traffic infrastructure network and we're putting in fiber optic backbone, the city's actually gained a lot from that because we now use that fiber optic backbone to run our IT and our communications throughout the city, which helps our public safety. All the fire stations get tied in. All these facilities like this one here, we brought that traffic cable into here, which now we're bringing internet and everything into this building through that fiber optic system. So we have some great little side benefits to doing these projects.
Dave, can I ask a question on the Coast Highway traffic signal? So that will start this summer, and then how long does that take?
I'd expect that to be several months. maybe a little longer than that. It's mainly on the sides of the road. It'll be some conduit laying, but then the cabinets for the controllers all get replaced. There is one changeable message sign in here, which is down at Newport Coast, I believe. We're starting to put in some, if you've seen those on the freeway, the signs that give you some advance warning on things to come, we will be putting some of those signs in the city. That's one of the goals of this project. So. Yes, that would be our hopes, that the synchronization, just to back up and belabor on that a little, right now those signals are very old Caltrans signals, and they're not necessarily tied together, and just the equipment itself, they have clocks and things in there that get out of sequence because of their age, and that causes delays in the signals, how they work. Bringing that up to speed and then tying them together with the fiber optic backbone so they talk to each other will give you significant improvements on coordination going through there. Hopefully you'll see it. You probably won't see it, but you will notice it's probably 5% increase, maybe 10% increase on just normal flow. It'll also help on the really congested times. So reliability is the big thing. We've had, as you know, when we went through the sanitation district, several of those controllers, we might have got stuck in the traffic jams that were in there. The controllers just fried or went down, and that just throws the systems off because they're very old. And just having reliable equipment will help. So. And then some other projects nearing construction. We have our fire station number 5, which is Corona del Mar, and the library project. We're currently out to rebid on that. We brought that in just recently. We asked the council to reject that bid and rebid it for some technical reasons. Packaged in that is the changing or rebuilding of the apparatus bay at the fire station number 6, which is on Irvine Avenue up in Mariners. Those projects will be moving forward soon. We have some citywide storm drain repairs. We have a network, as you know, storm drains underneath our city streets. As we videotaped those storm drains over the last year, we found that there's some areas, particularly the old metal pipes, need to be replaced. So we're going to be addressing that. So you might see some holes here and there throughout the city. And then we're going to come back later and do some concrete storm drain repairs too. Again, apologize for the blue here that's underneath there. It says Central Avenue Public Pier and Plaza. This is a project we just recently got the Coast Commission to approve the permits for, so we're in the design of that, and the construction will be starting hopefully in April here. At the end of this channel, which is, right around the corner here, up towards Lido Village, just before you go under Newport Boulevard, we're going to build a new public pier there. And then we own the property on the land side next to Lido Village, so we're going to update that plaza too for a nice entryway for the folks to use on that, and that'll be starting soon. And then we had a little talk about the Balboa Island seawall caps, and I'm happy to elaborate on that a little bit more. This is the project that Mr. Kiff mentioned where we're going to actually raise the cap on the north and the south side of the existing seawall. We are actually still trying to get our coastal permits, and I've got a meeting with them next month out on the site to work through some details. But we hope to start in May, and we're going to add up to 6 inches, 9 inches on one side and just about a foot on the south side to one, there's 2 issues with the seawalls. You have a structural issue, which we've been dealing with, and then you have a rising tide issue. And the cap is to get us through the rising tide issue to make sure we don't have any flooding and to carry us through the coming years until we deal more with the structural issue. And then we've got Mariners Dover Shore Street Slurry Project. This is another annual project we do. As I mentioned, we rotate throughout the city on a 7-year cycle. We will be doing our concrete program I mentioned earlier first, and we do all the breaks and cuts and patch the street. And then we come behind it with the slurry seal program, and we cover up the streets, as you see. It's very successful, makes the streets all new and gives it a wearing surface, protects the asphalt. So you'll be seeing that up in the Mariners Dover Shores area. Another project you've heard with council, and if you've been over at the PBR Commission, you've seen that we've been talking about pickleball courts. And our recreational folks have identified a need for pickleball courts. We have a lot of folks in the city that would like to see this. So we do have a location now, and it's going to be over at Bonita Canyon Sports Park. The design's now done, and we're going to be hopefully starting construction on that in May of this coming year.
Sorry to interrupt. Would you be willing to, and if you don't have it at your fingertips, you can say no, of course, provide us dollar amounts associated with these?
I would if I knew them. I'm sorry, you don't have it.
Yeah, no problem.
Didn't bring,
We'll go through it at Finance Committee here.
Okay.
We'll address it later. That's fine.
So then we have many things obviously in design, and we keep kind of a hopper full of things, so things are constantly moving through the system. And I wanted to point out some things that we're actually working on so you'll know they're out there and they're coming. Projects in design right now is, again, Bayview Heights drainage and stormwater treatment. If you're up in the Santa Ana Heights area, we have a project that's going to take some of the runoff coming off Mesa and down into the upper bay. We're going to be channelizing that to address an erosion problem and then running it through a treatment system and releasing it in the water, which will capture trash and some of the nutrients in there. That should be coming up here in the summer. We have a lot of need in our city parks to address some of the old retaining walls and staircases. If you've seen that, we have a lot of parks with old railroad ties in it. I think of Cliff Park and Irvine Terrace. Some of those walls are starting to have some issues, so we want to come in and replace those walls and rehabilitate them. And then some of our staircases, I was thinking about the Goldenrod staircase that needs some work over there. We'll be addressing some of those projects in the summer. Out on the peninsula here, we've talked about the Newport Elementary School, if you followed the council conversation on this. The playground is basically a city park, but the school uses that for their uses, and we've got to deal with the school district to partner in rebuilding that field. So, of course, the best time for us to do that is over the summer when the school's out. I know the beach will be busy, but we'll work with that. We'll be regrading the field and putting in a new turf field for the students in our park. And then up at the Big Canyon Reservoir off San Miguel in that area, we've got a metering vault project. You won't see that. We'll probably be inside the reservoir itself, but there's some critical water infrastructure projects that will be going on. We are going to be working on Fire Station 3 and 4 internally. We need some remodeling of the restrooms and the crew quarters in there, so a project that you won't see, but it's happening out there with our public safety folks. And then on our police station, we're going to be doing a remodel of the detective area and also the shooting range and the restrooms inside there, so keeping those facilities in good shape. Over towards Coast Highway, you're going to see the Arches storm drain diversion project coming in. You'll see some construction there. This is a real key project from the water quality side because we've been working on what we have is a state requirement to control bacteria in our waters. And we've addressed almost all of our hot spots except one, and we have a consistent hot spot over right near the Coast Highway Bridge over the bay there. We call it the Arches Landing right there. So this project's actually going to create a diversion in the low flow. We're going to put a drain in there and take that low flow water and take it over to the sanitation district, removing that flow of bacteria. That should really help on our water quality side.
Dave, do you mind if I, real quick, just to Mayor Muldoon's point, I was double checking real quickly if I believe all of the costs of this are in our CIP from last year, which is online. So if anyone in the audience would like to see, every project he just listed is in the CIP with a dollar amount associated with it.
Gentleman here, Bob.
The fire station and library in Coronaville, I don't understand why the city isn't selling off a portion of the land for the library because this one's quite so close. And just doing the fire station and possibly putting that one independent. I don't understand why the city does things like that. Can you help me?
Yes, I think at the time when we looked at that from a cost efficiency, we had two facilities on that property, and it made sense to combine the facilities from a cost standpoint and construct them both at the same time. There is a discussion, and Mr. Kiff alluded to it a little earlier, about what facilities we need to build and how many. And I was going to talk a little bit coming up here about facilities, and I think there's probably a discussion at the council level where they'd like to go on this. So the current direction's been to go ahead and replace both those facilities. And if we're looking at different direction, that's something obviously council would have to give us some guidance right now. So.
Okay, Mr. Webb, Mr. McCaffrey, we are also recording this meeting. So if you wait for the public comment section and you stand at the mic, we can be on the record for the residents to see as well, and then we'll answer their questions then. Thank you.
Yes, that's a good point. If you have questions, I'm happy to take them. Maybe we can do it at the public comment. We'll go over anything you like. That would be so it gets into the mic and into the record. A couple other current projects we have. We've talked about for some time about the undergrounding of utilities on the Balboa Peninsula on Balboa Boulevard. Several years ago, council started the process to underground these. We use our what we call Rule 20A money given to us by the California Public Utilities Commission through Southern California Edison to underground these utilities. I'm thinking about 2018 to start construction on that. It does take quite a long time to get all that done, funded, designed by the utilities, and put in place. In combination with that, we had 4 privately funded assessment districts that were passed last year. 1 in Corona del Mar, which is moving forward, and 3 on the peninsula. Those 3 on the peninsula, that bottom line there, 111, 16, and 116B, are all going to be combined with the Balboa undergrounding for economy of scale, and they'll be going together. So you'll be seeing those soon in 2018. Then some more projects in design. We've been working on Lower Sunset View Park. We're trying to come up with a concept on that. Hopefully we'll develop something and be bringing it back to council and the community for discussion on that. The goal on this one is to kind of get a concept of what we'd like to do with that property, and from that we can start applying for funding. We've had a lot of discussions about some pedestrian bridges to help the capacity of the intersection there and safety concerns. Once we have a concept, we've met with various folks, including Supervisor Steele's office, OCTA, and they're all willing to start putting grant funding towards it once we have something that we know we want to pursue. We also have some parking needs and other discussions on that property we need to talk about. We've got some future water main replacements. Some key ones here are on Balboa Island, particularly on Park and Balboa Boulevards. And then the bigger ones we have, if you probably don't know, we have several major water lines that cross the bay in various locations, and they were installed back in the 20s and 30s. Those lines are getting old, and we need to replace those, so we'll need to basically lay a new line across several sections of the bay. You may see that there'll be a dredge or something in here, or some crane or something out in the harbor. We'll bring those to your attention. They won't be interrupting traffic, but they're key components we need to address hopefully this year.
View Park. Just to refresh all of our memory, because Banning Ranch is now in limbo status, the city was hoping that we would have a parking lot in connection with an access road into Banning Ranch. So given the uncertainty of that development, so the only parking that we're really contemplating to be to the advantage of Sunset Ridge Park is through the Sunset View Park smaller parking lot. Is that correct? That would be our only parking option?
This is correct. As Councilmember Dixon pointed out, I think it's going to be a long time before they resolve the Banning Ranch issue, and one of our goals was to get parking out of there. So it's going to be key that we provide parking across the street. The bridge actually provides a safe way to get over there. I should say safer than what we would say walking down the hill, down across the intersection and up. So that's a key component. We have some other parking needs in that area that we'll be talking about and hopefully pursuing on that project.
And Dave, one other question on the water main replacements. This is water main, not sewer main?
These are actual pressure water mains, potable water, and they are funded out of our water utility. So one of the other projects that we are pursuing is also the replacement of Fire Station 2. That's the Lido Station behind the old City Hall facility. Very old facility there, one of our key functioning stations, probably our highest use stations, as the fire chief tells me. So we want to replace that. We're looking at either replacing it on site or maybe possibly relocating it to another property close by. We're looking at those decisions now. There's a lot to build a fire station. Of course, also keeping a live fire station going while you're trying to rebuild its facilities. Complex designs, and so we'll be talking more about that hopefully with council and how we do that in the future. And then we have a couple more projects here in the blue that are located in the harbor that I wanted to point out. Right next door here is the American Legion facility. It was actually a city-owned property that the Legion leases from the city. We have an obligation to work on their bulkhead here. We have some cap issues going on, so we've got a consultant on board to redo the seawall over there and the cap and make sure it's stabilized and good for many years to come. So that project should be kicking off soon. And then we talked a little bit again about the Balboa Island seawalls. There's the cap on the north and south side that is one project. The other project that we talked about earlier was the west end over by Collins. And those walls were built of a different era and a different style. And we've been concerned about the structural integrity of those. So we're about done with a detailed analysis of those. And I think we can rehabilitate versus replace those and get another 10, 15 years, maybe 20 years out of those. So we're putting together a project now that would do that. And you might see some construction in the near future. Hopefully we're going to be starting that maybe, I'm going to say summer, and get that project underway. And that'll get the island in good shape for a while with both structure, stability of the walls and also the height of the walls. And then lastly, a conversation that should be starting soon is Marine Avenue on Balboa Island. That's a very old street too. It's a concrete street. Most of you are familiar with it, and it has a lot of age on it. So one of the thought was we need to replace that street, maybe start a discussion with the island and the community and the businesses on there on how to replace that. Maybe all concrete, we'll probably do some tree work on there also. We have some eucalyptus trees that are in so-so shape on there. So that discussion hopefully will be starting in the next 6 months. And so Want to catch real quick, looking forward to next year, you'll see, and these are probably more routine projects I want to just point out for next year. We'll do our pavement slurry program next fiscal year. We're supposed to be up in Harborview, Seawood, and Spyglass area. We have lots of street rehabilitations. In this case, our concrete program. We have several local streets there on the peninsula, and also we'll be maybe doing the final link of Ocean Boulevard in Corona tomorrow. And then in the pavement rehabilitation program on the asphalt pavement side, we're looking at some more work on Irvine Avenue. That would be probably from Santiago South towards 16th. There's various stretches in there, some of which are owned by the city of Costa Mesa we won't be doing, and then some on Newport Beach side. Marguerite from 5th all the way up the hill to San Joaquin Hills is due for an overlay. And then MacArthur Boulevard, probably the second phase from Ford Road down to the 73 freeway, and I'm seeing some potholes and things going on that, so we need to get on that. The other thought on these two, we're wanting to get ahead of it because we understand the federal government's talking about an infrastructure program, and every time they do that, we'd like to have a couple plans on the shelf ready to go to maybe capture any grant funding that might come. So that would be something we try to get the plans ready for. The next project on there, citywide illuminated street sign panels. If you followed the conversation recently, council reviewed and came up with a new placard for our street signs. It's blue with a really pretty gold sailboat on it. And it's been real successful. We've been rolling that out. We've done a couple big streets, and we're getting a lot of great comments from the community and others that say we'd like to see that in our community. So we're thinking maybe we put in money next year if the council approves to go ahead and finish the city off and put all those signs up throughout the city. It's probably about $400,000 to do all of it. So we're going to work that out, and then we'll put it in the budget proposal for you. We have been doing that. Every time we do a signal or any opportunity, we've done a replacement. We've also stepped ahead, for instance, on MacArthur Boulevard, one of the entries to our city. We had folks saying, we don't feel like we're in Newport, so we changed those signs out up by the airport because there isn't a monument sign up there. It's one of the entries that doesn't have a monument. So we've done those. We also had some folks from the West Newport area saying Coast Highway would be great. So we did all the signs from the Santa Ana River down to Jamboree now. But there are some other areas that probably could use that. And then we have an ongoing facility maintenance and repair budget, about $1.5 million every year. Next year, we're looking at significant facility painting. We need to do some painting at our corporate yards, some of our libraries, the Central and Mariners Branch Library. So you'll see that coming up in the proposed budget, too. I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. My eyes went beyond that. I'm looking ways off here. Yeah, and I apologize. I did skip a project. They're preparing a general plan update. This is going to be a big event. The mayor's leading an effort to go with our community development people. Kim's going to talk about this a little later, but we're going to put money in the CIP. This will be a multi-year project, so probably about $1 million this year we'll need in the CIP, and I'm guessing about $1 million next year. So you'll see this twice, but this part of the general plan update, and Kim can talk about it, is a very significant one because it's got some of the big state elements in it. One of them for our side, on the public works side, is the circulation element, which needs to be updated, and there's a lot of modeling and other discussions that go in there. So it's a cost intensity to this part of the general plan. Some projects we want to talk about for maybe next year, and you heard Mayor Muldoon talk a little bit about this. This is our keeping going on our traffic system upgrades, and we're looking at putting some more intelligence and adaptive transportation items into our traffic signals. So adaptive transportation, real quick, is having the signals think more than just a standard timing. So we want them to have more sensors and things to maybe, for different times of day, do the programming itself versus having it manually done. So we're looking at maybe putting this in the project, and this will be something the council may want to give us some guidance on. Again, we'd have more technology, more sensors in there, more signs. The other area we briefly talked about earlier would be putting more emphasis in the harbor, and this is dredging is a big area we want to take a lot of work on. I have two pictures on there. One on the left is the clamshell method of dredging, where they put it on a barge and haul it off. We spoke a little bit earlier. The one on the left-hand side, is you see a dredge on there. That's the suction dredge, and that's how the harbor was originally dredged. We're looking at trying to see if we can get that technology back and use it. It's a very efficient and proven technology. Problem is we're kind of regulatory confined here. We got to get the regulators to get on board with this, so we'll be talking a lot about that too. One of the projects we would look for consideration is maybe funding the West Coast Highway landscape rehabilitation. We've had this in the budget for some time to hopefully finding the funds this year to do it. What we'd suggest is maybe putting an incremental phases, maybe $1 million this year, and we'll start going down the road, putting a couple projects in, and then maybe the following year we do a little bit more on that. We're also looking at maybe adding more trash reduction in our harbor. Some of our thoughts are working on some larger scales in, for instance, capturing trash coming down San Diego Creek. The picture on the bottom right there is basically our log boom that catches a lot of slug of trash that comes down. The one above it is a unique item we're starting to talk about, is maybe a trash wheel that might collect this automatically. We want to pursue that a little bit more. We want to add more basic capture devices like the one on the left-hand side, which is an inline storm drain structure that captures the trash coming down storm drains before it enters the bay. So have some discussions on that. Look for grant opportunities. Coming out of the Harbor Commission, one of the needs they'd identified was maybe adding a bilge pump-out station. We have, as you may know, a lot of sewer pump-out stations, but bilges are different. They have different contaminants and things in them, so we'd like to add a convenience station here where they can pump out their bilges, and that would be a water quality improvement and also boating enhancement. And then we need to do some more work on our public seawalls. We've talked about Balboa Island, but we have a lot of other street ends around the peninsula and areas like that that need to be raised and adjusted so we can stop some of the flooding at our high tides that we have now. One of the requests we made last year, and I know Mayor Dixon at the time, now Councilmember Dixon wanted me to bring this back, but this is the Balboa Boulevard extension going from where we left off at 12th going further down to Melinda. And there's a need there, about $1.2 million if we'd like to fund that. And then another topic that's come up, and we had some community meetings, and the discussion was to go forward with looking to try to do the extension of the Ocean Boardwalk Trail from E Street over to G Street. It's a natural extension. It kind of connects a place where people are going anyway. So we'd like to try to start this project, if council and community are willing. And then there's probably some discussion we might want to have on lower castaways to see where you want to go in the future, and that some of the ideas are maybe leave it as it is right now. If you're not aware, you can go down to lower castaways. Last year we made some improvements on the parking lot, the beach access, so you can go down and do paddle boards and other launchings there. There are some portable restrooms down there. But should we open it up, make it a little more visible? You can see the trees in the background. Should we define it a little better? Should we maybe pursue another project, maybe a private partnership with somebody to do a facility in that area? Or should we just continue to move towards the ultimate plan of some sort, which we talked about? There's a picture in the corner that was the last thought of an ultimate plan there. So looking forward to next year's CIP, our hopes are that we're going to continue with the $5 million general fund contribution again, and that was referenced earlier. It's really nice that this city has the resources to do that. A lot of cities don't have that kind of money. It really does keep your infrastructure in good shape. This year we want to really focus on the essentials, the nuts and bolts of the infrastructure, keeping our existing backbone, streets, everything going. So we'll put that forefront. We also want to basically work on the projects we have. We have a lot of things in our CIP, so we want to make sure that we kind of deliver as many of those as we can and maybe get those out before we start adding a lot of new stuff to it. And then focus on the harbor. We've got a lot of work to do in the seawall area, the dredging, the piers, a lot of pre-work to get the projects going, and we're starting that now. We also want to probably talk more about the facility finance plan and maybe paring that down if the council's direction is that way. We have a lot of facilities. Last I counted, we had 78 buildings in our city, facilities. That, again, we're a little different because we have a lot of restrooms and stuff on the coast and things, but that's a lot of facilities for a city our size. So maybe we have the right number, maybe we need to par that down. And then lastly, traffic transportation items. We want to improve the safety and efficiency of our systems, so we're looking at putting in adaptive transportation measures, building our fiber optic backbone a little stronger, adding more intelligent transportation items like signs, messages, et cetera. So with that, I'm going to open it to comments for council.
Dave, this last page, to me, really cuts to the core of what needs to be accomplished, finished, completed. That was an excellent presentation, by the way. But the thing that concerns me is that a presentation like this might give the community the impression that a lot of this is going to be done. And yes, revenue is great. We have a good revenue stream in the city, but we also have considerable debt. And I'm just concerned that people might be walking away today with the impression that all these fantastic things are going to get done, but in fact they're not. They're simply not going to because of the financial liability that this city faces. So this last page, to me, really capsulizes what will get done and what needs to get done. And you correct me if I'm wrong, okay?
Great presentation. Regarding the Central Avenue Pier, which is not publicly funded, at least the pier part, is there a way that could get done before summer, do you think, or are we probably optimistic with that?
Goal, at least the pier part. The plaza might come a little behind that. The pier, it's not a complex pier, and actually it's a design-build pier, so you could build it out of concrete, wood, fiberglass, whatever the designer, whoever bids the project can. So it's just nuts and bolts putting it together. The permitting has been the hardest thing of these things, you know, getting through the regulatory agencies. It's possible. That's our push. We're working with the Harbor Resources folks to put that forward. It's right next to the Elks Lodge, Lido Village. It's on the water side. There's a public plaza right there at the end of Central Avenue. Right in front of that is where it'd go.
And what kind of boats will be able to dock up there? Small, Duffy-sized boats, as well as up to what larger length boats?
I believe you can, obviously Duffy's, and maybe Brad knows better because we talked about the Harbor Commission, but you can go up to 20, 30 foot. The pier's going to be 80 foot long, and it's made for basically 4 20-footers. It'll have a backside to it, but you could have a lot of little Duffy's, or, you know, occasionally you have a bigger boat that comes up against that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Following up with what Councilman Herdman was talking about as far as what we're going to do is in the budget, I presume the FFP will come back to a study session sometime for us to be able to review project by project?
Mr. Priotter, I had some recommendations about the FFP I was going to offer today after Kim's presentation. And then the traditional path has been it goes to the Finance Committee and then to you. Only you guys can change the FFP. So the thought was maybe send that to the Finance Committee and let them review it and bring it forward.
So you've got ideas that you want to throw out in front of us.
I do.
Are you looking for feedback from us then on those items today as far as what goes to the Finance Committee?
I would love informal feedback today, yes.
That sounds great. One of the other things that I'd love to see happen, I know with all of the turmoil of Museum House and some of the other things, I would, you know, obviously traffic is one of those things, as Mr. Webb pointed out, that our community is really concerned about. And one of the ideas that I was thinking about that I'd love to see happen, I know Mr. Webb has this built into his department as far as you've got staff that deal with transportation that are always dealing with project by project basis, what improvements have to be made or what don't, or what doesn't need to be made. Dealing with, obviously, traffic in our city is mostly impacted not by the development that occurs within, but from development that occurs in the Inland Empire and other parts of Orange County that bring more visitors to the beach. And a lot of our traffic deals with visitor traffic. So having a guy that's on staff that advocates for improvements or improvement fees or going after other cities' improvements that have an impact on our city too. But the idea that I had was I'd love to see that brought under a single director, so to speak. You know, I hate the word czar. I agree with Mr. Muldoon. This isn't Russia. But a director that would be a transportation improvement advocate, that he would basically, that would be his whole sole management responsibility, and perhaps he answers directly to the city manager. He or she answers directly to the city manager rather than through the department levels and in different areas. They would still obviously, you know, report to the Planning Commission as far as that's where that transportation director would get his public input and public feedback through the Planning Commission. But somebody that'd be out there be advocating for residents at the commission or at the project level approvals that would be outside, that would be looking for outside funding sources And again, we've got a lot of resources within the city. We already do that. All I'm saying is let's pull those responsibilities under a single director. He would keep track of those impacts from outside the city. You know, things like what we've been doing in signal synchronization would kind of come underneath his purview, and other types of ongoing improvements. One of the other things that kind of bothers me that I'd love to see happen is I'd like to see the 2% mandatory development agreement fees that go to the arts to instead be redirected to what I would call extraordinary traffic improvements. And the transportation center that we have, which is continually expanding as we link more and more signals together, that might be something that would also be under its purview. So I'm not so sure that it's a change in what we're doing. It's more of a change of reporting and responsibility of what we're doing and bringing it under a central point where both the council gets more feedback, but the residents understand on an ongoing basis what's being done, what's not being done, and it's purely from a transportation or traffic standpoint.
Actually, after Dave's comment that he will be discussing the FFP, I'll hold off until after then, those comments.
So, I'm just very encouraged about what I'm hearing about the harbor and our staff, and I want to thank them for considering all the things that will make our harbor better. And so that you all know, Brad and I and all of my colleagues up here are going to be very focused on that, and that's pretty much, as you all know, why I'm here. So looking very much forward to the future on that. Thanks.
Regarding the one item that was on here, which was the refurbishment of Marine Avenue on Balboa Island, I think Balboa Island might be the second oldest village in the city, and there's a great deal of nostalgia and a sense of ownership and pride in the way Marine Avenue looks right now. And I know that you know this, but just given the experience that we've had over the last couple of weeks with the recommended modifications to Bayside Drive, it's going to be extremely important to involve Balboa Island community in any kind of redesign, as well as the Merchants Association. So I'm sure that will happen, but I just want to put a word in for that. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Yes.
Thanks, Kevin. Dave, just regarding the West Coast Highway landscape rehabilitation, I know that's been on the books for quite some time, and I'm well aware of our fiscal issues, and I appreciate you sort of breaking it down into bits, at least, perhaps where we could find a spot on the budget to get at least started on the project at some lower number and just drive that improvement project, although it's perhaps not critical. It is something that I feel that it's really a different entrance to our city than any other entrance in terms of the quality and the landscaping. And I know the residents out there have voiced over the years, I think everyone here knows that, their desire to move forward with that. So my thinking is, obviously, we can't do the whole thing, but to the degree that we can, I'll urge my fellow councilmen to try and bite a chunk of it off. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mayor Muldoon, members of the council, I'm Kim Brandt, Community Development Director. I will run quickly through what is going on in community development. 2017 will be a very busy year in our department, as it is, I think Dave Webb has already shown, will be in Public Works. I do want to talk briefly about two planning projects. I'm very pleased to say that yesterday we had the final action by the Coastal Commission on our local coastal program, and we are now officially certified with a local coastal program. So we are very happy about that. Thank you very much. It has been quite a journey, and I know there are people in this room who have participated in the last decade of efforts to get us where we are today. We will have Coastal Development Permit Authority transferred to the city officially on Monday, January 30th. We will start accepting applications. So that will be the first day that we can accept applications, and we have our staff currently in training and preparing all the necessary forms so we can start with that administrative authority. So we are pleased with that progress. The other major planning program that we are doing right now is the Mariners Mile Master Plan. We started that early, mid last year, and we have had 2 community workshops on it already. The Mariners Mile area is from Newport Boulevard over to Dover, and it is a little bit more than a mile, but we have been having quite a bit of community engagement, and the idea here is to look how to better energize the overall area, thank you, the overall area without changing the general plan land use intensities or densities for the area. But what is it that needs to be done in terms of creating a more unified village and making it all that we know that it can be? Our next community workshop will be Thursday, January 26th, and it will be right here in this room. We expect that the draft master plan will be out for public review in March. So I do want to highlight construction projects that are currently underway or planning projects, and I'll start here on the peninsula. In Lido Marina Village, I hope you've had a chance to go out and walk the newly revived area, and it's absolutely beautiful. And the next major feature or tenant to open will be Nobu Restaurant, which we expect will be opening up very shortly. That will be, I think, a very major tenant for the overall Lido Marina Village. Lido House Hotel is under construction. That, of course, is the site of the previous City Hall, and it's going to be a 130-room boutique hotel. Grading and site preparation is in process, and we expect it to be opening a year from now. Here's a rendering of the project as you're looking from Newport Boulevard. Coming down further on Newport Boulevard is the Newport View project, which has been under construction for quite a while, but is nearing completion. It's 27 units and with 36,000 square feet of retail and office uses. We expect that project to be completed shortly, and the models are now open for review and preview. Here's a view along the harbor edge. Newport Pier, we have been in an exclusive negotiation agreement with the Blue Water Grill restaurant, and here's a conceptual rendering of what the restaurant could look like. The City Council just authorized the submittal of an application to the California Coastal Commission for a coastal development permit. Coming down further on the peninsula to the Newport Harbor Yacht Club, we just issued the demolition permit this week to replace the existing clubhouse with a new 23,000 square foot facility. The clubhouse will be in operation, I think, during the construction because they will have a temporary facility in the water. Balboa Theater, it closed yesterday on Friday the 13th. I love that. So the ownership has transferred to the Lab Holdings, which some of you may know is the entity that's responsible for the lab and the camp in the city of Costa Mesa, as well as the Anaheim Packing District, and some additional development down in the city of San Clemente. They specialize in the restoration of historic buildings, and we're very excited about what they have planned for the theater. That is correct.
And Kim, the funds that were used to purchase that were CDBG, Community Development Block Grant funds, correct?
That is correct. So they will be returned to our community development block grant funds and then be eligible for projects that are consistent with our plan for using those funds. So they are restricted. But we have plenty of projects that would qualify for that. Then moving into Corona Del Mar. The Erie residential project has been under construction for quite a bit, and it's going to consist of 7 residential units. It's going to have an overall building permit valuation of $25 million. This is an aerial view, so you can see the foundation going in, but the steel structure is currently being put into place, and it's almost complete. Moving over to Newport Center. Villas Fashion Island has been under construction for quite a bit. It's 524 luxury apartments. We are expecting completion at least of the, I would say, the westernmost buildings in just the next couple of weeks. And here is a view of it as it's currently being finished. In West Newport, we have the Ebb Tide Residential Community. It's on Placentia near the border with the city of Costa Mesa. 81 homes are going to be constructed on 4.7 acres. And the models are expected to be open in the summer. In the airport area, the Uptown Newport project had received its entitlements a few years ago, and we have been processing the entitlement or the construction plans for the first phase, which will consist of 455 units. I think this is a really good rendering as you're looking at it from a little bit a drone view, I guess you would call it, from Jamboree, and you can really see the beautiful amenity deck that will be included as part of the project, and that they have a really cool pedestrian bridge linking the two sides of the buildings. And we expect that construction will start early this year. And across from the Uptown project, and is this a pointer? Do we have a pointer? I don't think so. I'm sorry, but to the Jamboree is to the right of the slide, and then that is the Uptown project, and then up to the upper left corner of the illustration is the Cole Center project. And that's a project that's consisting of 260 units. That's part of the existing general plan for new infill units to be incorporated within that area. That was anticipated by the general plan. The project application is submitted and completed to our department, and the environmental impact report is currently being prepared. And here's a close-up of how the new residential buildings would be incorporated into the parking lot that serves the existing office buildings in that area, and a new parking structure would be constructed so there'd be enough parking for both the commercial and the commercial, office, and residential components. And then also up in the airport area, up at Bristol Street and Bayview Place, at the site of the Kitayama restaurant, a proposal has been submitted to the city for a new assisted living care facility that would consist of 108 units, comprising 121 beds. This proposal does require a general plan amendment to allow the type of use as well as the height and the increase in floor area. So that is something that's currently under review by the Planning Division. And with that, I will conclude my remarks. I know that you did talk to some degree about the general plan update, and I would be happy to talk about that further if the City Council wishes. I know that Dave's given, I think both Daves have given some background on it, but I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, would you just mind outlining the process involved?
So the process to do a comprehensive update of the general plan is something that the City Council can help put into place. I would recommend that the City Council put together a committee to help go through the process that's not only includes maybe representatives of the Planning Commission or the City Council, but representatives from the community, because I think that any type of general plan update process requires, needs to have stakeholders from all the various areas of the community engaged throughout the process so that they have appropriate input and we get a good global perspective in the process. We would have to hire an environmental consultant to do an environmental impact report, as well as probably a planning or traffic consultant to help prepare the necessary technical studies. I would expect that the community engagement and review of the existing general plan could take anywhere from 8 to 12 months. And then the environmental process would occur after that, and that would probably take another 6 months. So and then the public hearings would begin. So ideally, it would take 18 months to 2 years to complete the process. I think that's a realistic time frame. We've done a lot of the updates to the traffic model when we were looking at the land use element amendments a couple years back, and we've been working on a comprehensive parcel by parcel analysis of existing land uses, and we've been doing that internally within my department. So a lot of the good base framework is in place. We just need to get the vision from the community as to what we want to see the city be in the next 10 to 20 to 25 years.
Thank you. Any questions from the dais? Yes.
Clarify on that. Thank you, Kim. A lot of good things going on with both of your departments, private and public investment. On the general plan update, so given a timeline that should probably be laid out conservatively, just like you said, are we looking at not the 2018 election, probably 2020, that it would come before the voters to approve? I mean, are we talking almost 3 years, or what would you? I have no point of view. I'm just wondering how this plays out.
Without a vote by the city voters would only be required if there were a change in the city's land use intensities or densities. And so I'm not presuming that would come out of this process. There is the alternative that the existing land use intensities and densities would stay in place that are already allowed by the 2006 general plan, or there could be a reduction. I mean, that's always a possibility, or there could be an increase. But if it wasn't done within the next 2 years, then it would have to go to the 2020 cycle if there is any change that results in an increase.
Kim, could you address which parts or which elements of the general plan, since it hasn't been updated since 2006, and I know it took us, I want to say it was a 3-year process to get through to the point where the voters had a chance to vote on it. What elements of the general plan are required to be updated and what their cycles are as far as housing elements and things like that?
So the city's general plan has mandated elements in it. That, when I say mandated, they're mandated by the state of California, and there is only one element within the general plan that has a mandated review and a cycle, and that's the housing element. We were most recently certified with a complete state-compliant housing element in 2013, and we have 8 years before we have to go through that cycle again. So in this cycle, I would not recommend that we make any changes to the housing element unless it's required through land use element changes that would occur through this process. We are required to look at our circulation element to incorporate the more complete streets changes that have been made and the guidelines that have been adopted in that regard. So that would be something that we would have to look at. We are required to look at our safety element in regards to hazardous area, the fire zones and other requirements of state law, and that would be something that we would wrap in as part of this comprehensive update. There's been some new legislation adopted regarding environmental justice, and we'll need to look at that and see how to appropriately incorporate that into our general plan, as well as sustainability elements. When we last looked at the land use element, the committee, as it went through the Planning Commission, and the City Council had made some changes to the land use element and adopted new goals and policy as it related to sustainability. I would think this would be a good time to revisit those previously proposed changes to the land use element to see if there's something that we want to carry forward in this comprehensive update. So I really see us looking at our land use element, our circulation element. I think the harbor element would want to be updated to reflect what's going on in there, as well as, which one did I miss? The safety element. And then all the other corresponding elements would need to be looked at to make sure that they're all working together and that it's internally consistent.
So in 2006, did we go through all of these elements as well, or did we concentrate primarily on the land use element, circulation element?
The 2006 was a comprehensive general plan update. I think a reformatting of the general plan, and so it was completely gone through, I think, from front front cover to back cover. I would think that we would be doing the same, but I don't see that we necessarily have to change the format. I see it more as a retooling or a refinement of the existing policies that we have in place and the goals that we have for the community.
And it would pick up any of those things that we missed in 2006 through the reformatting that may not be put together
Correct.
just the way we want it.
Correct, correct. And we do want to reflect the changing conditions of the community. A lot has happened in the last 10 years.
All right, thanks.
Just one other quick question. So just to clarify on process, we will begin this if it's approved as a budget item, a line item in the budget in terms of our capital spending?
That is correct.
So we won't really see anything until mid-year if this
Correct.
gets budgeted. Okay, thank you.
Questions on these two items, either Mr. Webb or Ms. Brandt's purview? All right, let's bring it back for public comments.
Good morning again, Mayor Muldoon and members of the council. My name is Nancy Skinner. I'm going back to other things that prior to Ms. Brandt's presentation because I am missing something here. I didn't hear anything other than what Mr. Herdman mentioned, and that is on the Bayside Drive status. That seems to be quite controversial right now, and that didn't come up at all. So I wanted to know what that status was. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kiff sent out an email. I don't know if you want to give a brief summary to the folks who weren't on that email about Bayside.
Thank you, Mr. Muldoon. I know the council we probably had maybe 80 or more, Jeff, emails from especially residents on Balboa Island asking that, expressing some concerns, especially about the element that would be a roundabout at Harbor Island Drive. And my email yesterday that I discussed with Mr. Herdman as I sent it out was try to explain the reasoning behind that thinking and where it is in the process, and I'll tell you exactly where it is in the process. The council gave direction just to take a further look at that element as designed. In other words, go out and spend a little bit of money to design it with a roundabout. All of that still has to come back to the council. The council could say, we don't like this design, or we want a refinement to that, or arguably you could still just go back and just re-slurry the street. So a lot is still in play, a lot is still ahead, and I made that commitment that I think Mr. Herdman is going to lead, that to do more outreach about that, especially with Balboa Island.
Mr. Mayor, quick question.
Mr. Caffrey, could you stand up to the podium and ask your questions after Mr. Piotr asks his? 1 second.
I know Mr. Kiff hasn't gone through the FFP yet, and I think there's going to be public input on that. Do we want to have him do that before we continue? We'll do that after. Okay, thanks.
Would you please state your name and the question for the record?
How much do the designs has been spent and will be spent so far?
Actually, we have not started the design yet. We've just done some concepts, so we've spent roughly $10,000, $15,000, I believe, on developing some concepts. We need something for the community to look at and discuss, and once we get that figured out, then we'll hire the design consultant to do the hard design.
Brian Ozonian. Touching on traffic that Councilmember Piotr talked about and the Balboa Theater, I would ask that you keep those funds from the Balboa Theater for Balboa Village. I know we're going to need more, especially when I suggest to you that we need the parking structure where the old Balboa Market was, because in relation to traffic and parking, it's really a needed facility. And I envision something that's a couple floors, maybe subterranean, as well as a couple above. So I would ask that be an objective for future planning. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Baker?
Thank you. I'm here actually this time to make two compliments. My first compliment is to Mr. Webb's department. One of the things, he's probably hesitant to brag in his department, but one of the things I'm aware of, and I know some of the council members are, is that his department and his staff aggressively seeks and has been very successful in getting grants to fund a lot of the things that he has referred to. And I think it is important to publicly recognize the work of his department to help offset the financial impact on the city. The second compliment is to you, Mr. Mayor, and the council members for bringing the idea of the general plan update. I think it's extremely important. The general plan has served us well up to this time, and it definitely is time to revisit, and thank you for doing that.
Ms. Brenner?
Good morning, Joy Brenner. I just wanted to speak in regard to the CDM library and fire station project. Historically, I know I'm not saying this disparagingly, but some of you have not been in Newport all that long, and you don't know. I was speaking with Nancy Gardner about the history that they have tried to close that library many, many times, and the community has risen up and just protected it in all of our fierceness. So we care about that library, and it's very important that also I think that we all look at the city in general. I know you each represent districts, but I feel the harbor and the seawalls, and those are critically important. I don't live on the harbor, but those are important. Those are important to all of us. And it's also important to understand that there are other resources, public resources in the community that are also important to all of us. And the value of our libraries is just, it's impossible to quantify. But the main thing that the new council people I wanted you to understand was the process we went through to get to the design that we have for that library. It was an example, a beautiful example of city staff working with city library commission and council and the community to really go out and get input from the community. We did surveys in our community. We passed out flyers that showed the different designs. We got such buy-in on that project. And it really, I think it's an example that can serve for future projects in the future to how we really do get the community and the city staff and everyone to work together to come up with projects that we support so that we don't end up down at city council objecting and causing all kinds of chaos, because we've gone through the process that has worked beautifully. The only other thing I'd like to say is I know we have these liabilities that we have to pay our bills. We have to protect our Balboa Island and our other harbor-related areas, but we're a rich community. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, we are a rich community. We have such abundance in this community that I would hate to see us go into Depression-era mentality because, yes, we're going to pay our bills. We're going to do everything we have to do. But let's not get to the point that we emphasize that and not look at the big picture in the future of how important it is for us to take care of, build, and be proud of our public spaces that we have in the community so that they will serve us for years to come. Thank you very much.
Schroeder.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is George Schroeder. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of touch on an item, and I don't want to, I know this isn't the meeting that's going to determine it, but I just wanted to kind of put it further up on your radar screen. I think it was Mayor Michael Hand that in, I think, 2008, he came up with these neighborhood enhancement committees. I served on the one for Lido Village with Planning Commissioner Bill Tunlop, who was here earlier, and we came up with a great design concept for the Lido Village area. Lido House Hotel followed that, so we have a great designed hotel that's going to fit in with the area. The development company that's doing the Lido Village area, again, is staying with the theme. So we have a lot of great things happening in the Lido Village area. Those neighborhood enhancement committees all came up with concepts to improve the streetscaping in the different parts of town. I think most of those have been completed. We have the CDM streetscaping, landscaping. We had something along Bristol Avenue in that area. So, but in this part of West Newport Beach, we did get landscaping on Balboa Boulevard. As I mentioned, we have the Lido House Hotel coming in across from the site there. The city did take over Newport Avenue. They actually fixed the street, so the parking is gone. You bought the old blockbuster, put the parking lot in. It's fantastic. You realign 32nd Street. So everything on this side of town is coming together great. That hotel is going to open next year. Lido Village is going to be opening up, and something that's getting overlooked. And I want to thank Councilman Avery for mentioning it. West Coast Highway is an eyesore. Okay, the $4 million it would cost to do that, okay, to kind of string that out over 4, 5, 10, or 15 years, as Lido House opens up, as Lido Village, we draw people in, probably 25 or 30% of them are going to come in from Coast Highway through really ugly streetscaping. Okay, so I think it's kind of penny wise and pound foolish to think it's financially responsible to, you know, I appreciate we have things we have to choose and decide from, but I hope as we move ahead that you just, you know, think about that, because you've completed everything, but you just leave that. If you leave that undone, you're not accomplishing what we want to accomplish. Thank you.
Good morning, Lee Pearl again with Balboa Island. I wanted to start out by complimenting your staff. You know, you have a great staff, and the Park Avenue Bridge is probably the best example of community outreach, whereby they've bent over backwards. We have a newsletter. We have an employee out there on Thursdays. You couldn't have done a better job working with the community. We know we're tough to work with, and they've done a really great job. We also had the police department assisted us during the boat parade, and a lot of the traffic problems that we've had in the past have been alleviated. So I'd like to thank the police department and all of your other departments. But getting back to my capital improvement program, I always do this. I think this is my 3rd year to come to the workshop, and I always do my capital improvement program. So I was just going to make a couple quick comments. Marine Avenue is a great breakthrough in dealing with the streets on Balboa Island, and I know Councilman Herdman and I have talked about this, but I'd like to see Marine now dovetail into our residential streets too. They're cracked and need renovation, and I think there's a next step after Marine Avenue. I did not see that in the discussion. Secondly, the seawall cap is going to give us the ability to maybe talk with FEMA, and if we could get our flood insurance as voluntary, it might take a little work, but with the city's assistance, you could save the residents of Balboa Island thousands of dollars dealing with the freeboard requirement and the seawall with the extension that we're doing. So we'd like your assistance on that. The city is giving us beach sand for the first time in a long time, and we're elated. It's going to improve our beaches, and I think it's consistent with your goal to keep the beaches in Newport Beach pristine. We're very excited about that. I think all the residents are going to be complimentary as we bring beach sand in. I'd like the council to look at Ruby Beach, our kids' beach, and maybe even talk about putting some infrastructure, some facilities for the kids, because it's a heavily used beach, and everybody on the island and also the public use that beach. And finally, the fire station is up for some improvements. I just wanted to briefly mention that there is nothing more fun than having a meeting at the firehouse. We can facilitate like 200 people at the firehouse. If you could, in the redesign, give us just a little, just think about that's our big community meeting place. Don't spend a lot of money, but give us the ability to use it as a meeting place. Maybe some sound equipment and some other resources available to use it as a public meeting place. And with that, final comment is on Bayside. I think we can reach a consensus with all of the communities on Bayside. I think everybody recognizes it needs something, and I think that with Councilman Herdman's input, we're going to be able to reach something that'll be workable for all of us. Thank you.
Mayor Muldoon and City Council, Bernie Swalstead, Chairman of the Colonel Marr Business Improvement District. We had a subcommittee meeting of the bid. And one of the recommendations I think that we're going to give to the council in regard to CIP would be to have a small monument sign identifying Corona Mar entrance at the south end of Corona Mar, mirroring the entrance sign at the north end of Corona Mar. So I just want to let you know about that. Thank you.
Morning. I'm Paul Watkins. I live in West Newport. I'm a member of the Board of Library Trustees. I'm pretty dang conservative, bordering on cheap. I chase my wife from room to room, shutting lights off as she leaves those rooms. When she leaves the house, I shut the heat off. And I remind her constantly to keep her showers to a reasonable length of time. Having said that, I urge you to stay the course with the fire station number 5 and the library, Corona Del Mar. It's be a terrific asset for our community. It's up for rebid, as you guys know. My hope is that we don't do any value engineering or any other cuts to the architecture detail or the design until we get that rebid in. And at such time, if the rebid doesn't come in where we want it to, there are some solutions. There's private partnership, private-public partnerships. There's some other things that we can do to make it happen. So thank you.
Mayor Muldoon and members of the council, my name again is Jim Mosier. Regarding this rather amorphous, at this point, plan to comprehensively update the general plan, as I've always expressed to you, I think it's always good to review policies, but I wanted to point out that my belief is the work on the current general plan actually started in the year 2000. So even more than Councilman Piotr remembered, I think it was like a 5-year process to produce that 2006 general plan, which we've been following for 10 years, and at the time it was approved by the voters, or at least the land use element of it. It was supposed to be good for another 10 years from now. So I think it's very good to talk about it and see what changes may in the future need to be made, but I just don't think it's realistic that you could completely revamp that in a period of 8 to 12 months. I don't think that's realistic. And indeed, I think the problem with our current general plan is the council in Newport Beach has been too hesitant actually to make incremental, smaller changes to it when we change our view of how development should be in Newport Beach to actually reflect that in our current general plan. And being a little cynical about this, the reason past councils prior to this one have done that seems to be merely to avoid green light votes, because when you put that new development into the general plan land use tables, it triggers the need which the people thought they had, and the people are rather upset now about not getting these opportunities to vote on the changes, and we currently have development that's totally out of whack with the limits that are in the general plan. We heard, for instance, about the project at the corner of Jamboree and San Joaquin Hills Villas at Fashion Island that is currently being built with 524 units. Anybody reading our general plan would find no way to understand that consistent with that there could be more than 450 units there. The reason the general plan was not amended to do that was simply to avoid a green light vote. This is a problem that I think this city council has to face, because last month the California Supreme Court, in the case about the Orange Park Acres, Orange Citizens for Parks and Recreation against the Superior Court, made a pretty substantial and unequivocal ruling that a city has to follow what the public sees in the general plan. So if it says that there is at this place restricted to public use, it should be a public use. If it's restricted to 450 units at that location, it should be no more than 450 units. We've been deviating from that, and I think it's not been good for the council to do that, and I think the public is not appreciating having that happen. So looking at the general plan is good. Amending it as we go along probably would have been better. Thank you.
I'm Jill Johnson Tucker, and I'm chair of the Library Board of Trustees. And sorry that you're being inundated, but I think that was the big news of the year, was how high the bid came in for the fire station and the library. And I'd like to point out, as we're thinking about what to do moving forward with that, that the improvements being made to the fire station and the library in Corona Del Mar weren't made at the request of the library users or the Library Board of Trustees. It was because of the need of the fire station to improve their bay. And what the library will essentially be getting in return is a really refreshed building, new technology, but it's pretty much a replication of what is currently on site. And I hope that moving forward that you'll consider rebidding the project and keeping it as is. The library users are definitely going to benefit from a refreshed building. I've seen historically through the city when Mariners Park Library was redone, the usership went up dramatically. Central Library, when the 17,000 square feet were added, it was packed before. Those new 17,000 square feet are likewise packed. The CDM library is well used. It'll be packed, I believe, if it's refreshed. But I just want to emphasize that wasn't at the request of the library users or of the Board of Trustees that we receive a new library there. So I'm a little concerned that it's going to be reduced in size, reduced in our ability to use it as a library, and I'd implore you not to take that measure. Keep our library the way it is. Additionally, I know that there is always the struggle to justify having a library so close to Central, and it's really a different usership. It's nannies and strollers, older people that come and use that library. They really prefer that type of a facility, and I think there's a need for both types of facilities in the city, albeit they're close. And within the village of Corona Del Mar, they really look upon that library as being a vital heart of their city. So thank you for all you do. I hope that you'll move forward with rebidding. Hopefully it'll come in where we had thought it was going to be. And thanks for your time.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Bringing it back. Before we go into guidance to city staff, I know, Mr. Kiff, you were going to look into potentially discussing FFP. I'm not sure this is the proper venue for it because we're coming up on 15 minutes. How quick do you think you can make it?
Well, pretty fast. I guess the better question is if I say things that are too controversial, do you have enough time to talk about them? So
no. And that's a very serious issue, by the way. So we'll deal with it accordingly in a very serious manner when time comes. This time, I'd like to bring it back to the council and individually just make sure. Some of you already indicated some things you would like staff to do as far as direction. But I want to offer you this time either just to reiterate it or state something now you weren't able to state earlier today. Mr. Herdman? Nothing? Mr. Avery? Mayor Pro Tem Duffield?
So, I don't mean to put this gentleman on the spot, but, this whole world now, we're all staring at our phones, and we communicate that way, it seems like, and as even old people do now. Unbelievable. But I wanted to emphasize how grateful I am to Rob and his staff and his people to continue to try to make our website, and I know this sounds a little corny, but our website is a method of how we all get things done. So when you guys have questions and you want to know something about a date or a meeting or this or that, I want to tell you this city has worked really, really hard on trying to get this website so that it just flows and works really well. My MB, Newport Beach, I don't know if you guys know this, but it is an incredible tool. For the harbor, for example, in the future, we're looking for all kinds of methods for boaters to communicate to the city and various people within it, and for doing all kinds of things as we grow and grow and grow with this thing. So I would encourage to continue to use technology so that we can expedite our questions and get our answers and eliminate a lot of unknowns or rumors, if you will. So it's all good, and I just want to, once again, support and thank the Rob Easton and his people as it is a phenomenal thing, our website, and I'm proud of it, and I want to keep it going. That's it. Thanks.
Ms. Nixon.
First of all, thank you, staff, both Community Development and Public Works, and thank you for all you're doing in my district. Of course, I'm very grateful for the improvement projects, and I just, to your question, I want to reiterate my continued support for the Balboa Boulevard landscape improvements, which I recommended a year or so ago that we defer that because we had other budget scheduling priorities, but I'm happy to see it back on. I'm not supportive of deferring this or the West Newport projects because we did pull those off and let other projects take priority, but I think it's back to making sure that they're front burner because those are important for our betterment of our community and quality of life. Everything that you've laid out there, if you're just looking for kind of a verbal nod, I support what you've got on the list, and I think the traffic synchronization is really important, as I alluded to earlier, and if we could solve the Bayside issue, I think we will be at peace in our community. So thank you very much.
Mr. Piotr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple things. One, I know that you have promoted the Taxpayer Protection Act, call it Part 2, where we're going to require voter approval to borrow money. I want to make sure that stays on the agenda. We talked a lot about the different areas of potential cuts, et cetera, and I know that will all go through the Finance Committee, so I won't bother to reiterate that. I agree with Councilman Duffield. Our website looks good. My Newport Beach is improving all the time, and we're trying to make things more transparent all the time. But definitely if members of the public have other input or questions like Mr. Mosier brought out even today, transparency is a key goal of this council. I want to make sure that continues and that's promoted. And I also want to make sure that we have on the agenda to look at repealing our employee tax, our business license fee based on employees, and replacing it with a business license fee, which is more of a database management situation. And all the things that we're have going on in the harbor, I won't reiterate, but a harbor plan, a port plan, a harbor master to try and bring all of this together under one headship would also be a high priority. Thank you.
Sir O'Neill.
Yes, I'd like to reiterate saying thank you very much to Mayor Muldoon for his leadership putting this together today. Thank you very much to our staff for the presentations. Thank you very much to all of the members of the public who got up on a Saturday morning to come out and discuss. There's a substantial amount of institutional knowledge out in the audience right now, so thank you. I do appreciate it. I'd like to point out real briefly, I would love to see a continued emphasis on restricted fund use that goes into community development. Programs like the SHARP program, which I'll highlight very briefly, is using affordable funding to help low-income seniors in combination with Habitat for Humanity. If you know any seniors that are on fixed incomes that need help in their homes, please do contact OASIS so that we can get the help that they need. CDBG funding, coming back around to that, there's a lot of emphasis on the ability, for example, when we're talking about undergrounding, I know about 5 or 6 years ago we had a loan program to make sure that, again, seniors, especially on fixed incomes, aren't forced out of their homes because of the cost of connection fee, the connection cost. So continuing to emphasize programs like that would be fantastic use of restricted funds. The surplus, I do want to emphasize again very strongly, following Council Policy F5 to make sure 50% of that goes toward our unfunded pension liability or at least long-term liabilities. The FFP, we didn't talk much about it, but just for the general public, it's the facilities financing program. It's a big deal. We have it on our council website, or on our website. Mr. Kiff, one thing I'll note is that at the Finance Committee, we have pages on that were presented to us that say development agreements and private contributions that emphasize how much money we actually take in from those developer fee agreements and private contributions, and then attribute those to the capital improvement programs. I'd like to make sure that those pages go back on, because I don't believe they're on the website right now. Wastewater master plan, this is an issue that's come up. It was mentioned here. We're still operating in a structural deficit based on the approval of a master plan in 2009 that required a certain amount of infrastructure that was not, at the same time, paid for by a rate increase. We need to bring that back. I've spoken to George Murdoch. We need a new rate study. And so we need to at least bring that back, because last year the council and the finance committee, the finance committee recommended and the council adopted at least a partial plug to help offset some of that structural deficit, but we've got to address it. We can't continue down that path. And then on study sessions, I'd love to see a study session on our debt policies, a study session on our pension liability that's similar to what the finance committee has seen, and a discussion about the harbor master plan, because I think everyone up here can agree that's going to be fantastic. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Mr. Herdman, do you want to comment?
Things I want to say. He called on me first, and I wasn't ready. I too want to compliment the staff on their preparation for today. This is the 4th year, I think, in a row that I've attended this workshop, and it's always extremely informative, helpful, useful. I think there's a climate of hopefulness in our country now, presently, and I certainly think that hopefulness is prevalent in our city also simply by the amount of people that attended today's workshop, and I want to thank you for being here. One item that I have talked to Dave Kiff about that I believe I heard Kevin say at our meeting where we were sworn in, as far as an additional goal or something to look at is election reform in our city. It's very important to me that our city attorney be given the authority to enforce our election laws and codes in this city, and that simply is just not the case now. It has an extremely easy solution to it or fix to it, and it's one simple word, the word elected. If you take a look at our city charter and our election codes, if that word were eliminated, Aaron would have the ability to enforce our election codes and our election laws in this city. So that is something that will be a priority of mine, and I hope that my fellow council members will join me on that. And again, thanks. An excellent morning, and thank you for attending.
Thank you. Thank you to my colleagues for Saturday experience. Call it that. Council, staff, great job. Mr. Kiff, the FFP issue that Mr. O'Neill touched on, I do believe is important. I think we should address separately. I also noticed not here as an itemized issue anyway, so I don't think there'll be any problem. But I hope that we can address some of the construction projects that Mr. Herman correctly pointed out will not be happening, and some of the FFP projects that we need to take a closer look at. Just to reiterate what I said earlier, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get us out of here quickly. I really personally think that it is wise for us to take the surplus and dedicate 50%, Mr. Neal had hinted at, towards the unfunded pension liability, and 50% towards a seawall fund. And I think that we should also look more closely at what that seawall means. It's going to be a very important issue for Mr. Herdman's district, and I'm not sure how we do that with the committee. Defer to him on how he'd prefer it, because I know there's some different engineering aspects to it that will affect the funding. Also, Mr. Kiff, I'm sure we'll cover this in the FFP review when we do so. Properties to be sold with proceeds, which I hope to be directed towards the unfunded pension liability. And really looking forward to the comprehensive general plan amendment. I appreciate Mr. Baker's suggestion that we do so. Similar to, again, 2006, we'll have a large community outreach and input so that there are less issues with the vision of the city going forward if we can all get on the same page and consider everyone's concerns about immediate and long-term impacts. So I believe with that, unless there are any other comments from the dais. Okay. Council is telling me we have to do public comments. Do we have any public comments? Thank you. All right, we are adjourned.